Who decides anyway? I don't know if you've noticed, but every time Sam opens up her We Thought each Sunday, she starts with a question. She's always looking for answers. But who isn't? So I thought I will start by asking you a question this time. And it's a simple question, but one that has great theological and philosophical implications. So here it goes. The mind-boggling question. Are you ready? Who decides what you do and when you do it? You know, it's really a question of free will. Are we free to make rational, or in some people's cases, irrational choices on a daily basis? Are you free to do it? It's one of those questions which has been at the heart of our human existence, and particularly its search for knowledge and the knowledge of who God is. Now, some have argued quite clearly that we do not have free will, that our destiny is in the hands of the Creator, and every move that we make is by His hand, His guidance. We are puppets, if you like, playthings, ants in a colony, overseen and manipulated by a greater force. The other extreme finds us completely free in all ways. God simply sitting back, watching with no participation and no intervention whatsoever. We make the decisions, we're the ones who decide it all, and our fate is firmly in our own hands. Of course, those are two extremes, and perhaps the reality is somewhere between that spectrum. I would not argue that we are puppets. Definitely not puppets without any choices of our own. But I also don't think we have a creator who simply stands back and observes what's happening and doesn't get involved. Our reading today in Jeremiah 18 gives a completely different picture when it comes to our lives in the hands of the Creator, or in this case, the potter. Now Jeremiah is sent down to the potter's house, and this is what Jeremiah begins to recount from his observations. And he writes this: "So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hands. So the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him." So here is the potter working with the clay, shaping it into what he sees fit, until something seems to go wrong with the clay. Now, if I was in his position, something would be going wrong with that clay every time. Now notice the clay is marred in his hands, but not by his hands. It's not the mistake of the potter that the clay becomes marred. Of course, Jeremiah is not concerned so much with the clay as with what it symbolises: us, humanity. Now I wonder how often we hear others, and perhaps ourselves at times, question why God would create a world like this one. It's crazy. We wreck the planet, we turn and go our own way, fulfill our sinful desires, and then place the blame squarely on the Creator as if it is his misplaced skills that got us here in the first place. Perhaps you can look at the current COVID-19 pandemic and wonder why God would create a virus and forget the fact that it caused, and we forget the fact that it caused no harm to us as humans until we began meddling with the exotic animals that carried the disease. We were perfectly fine until we started messing about. It is clear that we often seek to blame the Creator before we blame the stewards, the ones who were supposed to look after what was created. It's like blaming my TV manufacturer after throwing it out of the window and complaining they didn't make it right when it broke. What is fascinating here with the potter is that instead of throwing away the clay at this stage, even though it's marred, he begins to shape it into something else as he seemed best. And then the question God poses with this action is this: can I not do the same with you, Israel? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, he says. He calls to the people of Israel, his people, who are sinning, and tells them how it is. God is sovereign, and he chooses to do what he chooses to do. And if his people are sinning against him, if the people that he created are marred, it's not because of anything he has done. And so he will choose to destroy, to break down that which has gone completely against him, and do with the marred clay as he chooses. But he also says that if those he announces relent, when they admit and turn from their destructive paths, then he will stop. The key word here is if. 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 You see, God is sovereign. He is the one who does decide our fate. There's no escaping that fact. But that word if changes a lot. Unlike the clay and unlike the puppet that simply sits there unless it is moved by the handlers, we have a role to play. We can choose to be moulded by the Creator, to follow his way, to flourish in his plan, or we can choose a different path. We can choose to do it our own way. But what we choose, the if, is what decides how we will face life. The Lord says to Jeremiah, "Does the snow of Lebanon ever vanish from its rocky slopes? Do its cool waters from distant sources ever cease to flow?" That's strange that I might mention that, but what God seems to be saying in that is that what his people have done is completely unnatural. It is not in line with how they were created. It's like the plane created to fly, keeping to the roads, or the boat that doesn't want to float. Now Jeremiah goes on to point out that all of this is from the actions of his people. They have gone a different way. They've gone a way that was not created for them to go, and as a consequence, they leave themselves to the consequences of the sovereign God. I wonder just how many of us know that we are not living the way God had intended for us. The way we look after the world he created, the way we treat our bodies, the level of dependence we have on him, all of these things, I wonder where we stand on them. Our God is not a distant being, nor is he pulling every string. But what he is a loving creator who created us with purpose, with beauty, and with a plan. It is us who have the freedom to live within that plan, or the freedom to abandon it completely. And we have seen what happens when we tamper with the natural and take it in unnatural ways. Later on in Jeremiah 29, which we will no doubt come to in the coming weeks, reminds us of these words, important words, challenging words, because they say, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for evil, to give you a hope and to give you a future." This is the potter. The creator God who created us is still creating and still has a plan for us. So who decides anyway? You do. I do. God is sovereign and he is supreme, but we can decide how we respond. The people of Israel, on hearing the words from Jeremiah, seek to silence him. You know, they don't want to hear anything that incriminates them. They plot to kill, to remove him from the picture, not hearing what they want to hear. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Exactly what they did with Jesus. But what will we do? We've had plenty of warnings. We continue to see the consequences of meddling in the unnatural, walking the way that was never designed for us. Will we continue to hide them from our ears? Will we stop listening to continue walking into the daft and dark paths? Or will we seek to live within the purposes designed for us? You decide anyway.